Well, hello there, and welcome back to the Red Shadow Watches the X-Files. And you're going to have to allow me to go on for a few minutes here about something, about a few different things. I did the very first episode of this, like the actual, after I watched the pilot. And I want to remind people who either didn't see the first videos or whatever. I've watched the X-Files all the way through many times. This is not my first time watching the show. This is just me rewatching it for the sake of sitting down and talking about each episode after I watched them. So anyway, when I watched that first one and put up the video, I don't remember anything about what I said, and I had absolutely no expectations of any kind as to what the video was going to do for other people or whatever. It was just me sitting down talking about my favorite show of all time as I watched each episode. I got a little lazy and I got a little distracted by other things. I did that other video in May. It was approaching summertime. My daughter's out of school for part of the summer. I don't have as much of the free time that I like to consider as what I'm going to do. Things like this, watching TV shows and then making videos and whatnot. And I got a lot of other things that I prioritized ahead of doing this, even though I was really wanting to do this really bad. That's kind of an explanation as to why it's been so long since I've done this. But since May 20th, I think it was, when I put up that first actual video, the video got a lot of views. And I don't know really why. Like, right now as it stands, it's around 1,100 plus views. When I first looked into it, like when I first really noticed it was getting up there, it had like 300 views. And I had absolutely no idea why. I have other X-Files related videos that have decent numbers of views, but I have 40 subscribers. Why would my video have 1,100 plus views? So I just allowed myself a moment to look at the analytics on that video. It roughly averages over all those views about 30 seconds. It's a 15 or 16 minute long video. Most people aren't going beyond the first 30 seconds. So apparently there's something about this that they don't like, or maybe this rambling or whatever it is. I don't know. Whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just, it got a little intimidating to see all those views, and then it brings me down a little bit when I see that people aren't really watching the video. I also noticed for the first time that that video had a thumbs down on it. It has one thumbs up and one thumbs down. I don't know how many thumbs down I have on videos, but that was interesting, just an interesting feeling. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about that for a minute, you know, because it's my channel, so fuck it, I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about. If you want to listen to me talk about the X-Files, I guess you'll make it through the first couple minutes. But now it's time to go ahead and talk about the next episode. Official first episode of season 1 called Deep Throat, released or aired originally on September 17th, 1993. I think I've mentioned it in a few excuse me, in a few other videos, but I wasn't on board the X-Files train until around season 5, so I wasn't around when that first aired. But I've seen this episode a few times since then, and here are my thoughts. First of all, it's a great episode. It's actually a really, really amazing episode for the first season, considering how raw the show was and how the mythology was just, you know, obviously it was just formulating. I'm sure Chris Carter didn't have much of an idea of where he wanted it to go ultimately, but for this episode, it was pretty good. I consider this a mythology episode because it deals very much with the conspiracy of the government covering up the existence of extraterrestrials and their utilization of alien technology to create their own aircrafts. Because that's what the episode was about. I mean, it didn't even really try to say, hey, these are UFOs. No, they were like, these were test pilots with the, excuse me, was it the Air Force? I hate to be doing this. Yeah, it's the Air Force. I'm referring to the Wikipedia page just so that I keep my thoughts in order. But having to do with Army, or excuse me, Air Force test pilots testing out the aircraft. Geez, I can't even talk. The aircraft that utilizes the UFO technology, and how everybody in around this Air Force base, it was Nellis Air Force Base in Idaho. I don't know if that really truly exists. Actually, I believe that it does, because, well, okay, Nellis Air Force Base is an Air Force base in Nevada. They must have patterned it off of that. Ellen's Air Force Base is the name of the base in the show, based in southwestern Idaho. Excuse me. I knew it was in Idaho, but my eyes just wandered to Nellis on there. Anyway, sorry. Like I said, this is rough. There's nothing professional about this. I'm not doing editing. I don't have a script. I'm just sitting down and talking about this episode. And I don't want to give you a complete synopsis of the show, because I want this series to be, for X-Files fans, they can just be like, yeah, I know what you're talking about, but more than anything, I just want to hear another X-Files thoughts on it. And if you're not a fan of the show or you haven't watched it, I want you to hear my exuberance and my excitement over it, and think maybe this is something I'll look into from what he's talked about. So anyway, if I get this series going and actually am consistent with this, maybe I won't be so bad right now. But anyway, Mulder and Scully go to Idaho to investigate the disappearance of a Air Force pilot whose wife is getting kind of stonewalled by the Air Force themselves, and so they come to investigate, and they end up discovering, it's a base, and they seem to be testing UFO technology on aircraft that they've created using the technology. And then the main point of this episode, in my eyes, is to introduce a big figure in the X-Files show itself, in the lore of the show, and that's the informant who goes by the name of Deep Throat, played by Jerry Hardin, who's an actor that I guess I figured he'd been in a lot more things, like memorable things, than I could come up with, but he's just kind of one of them character actors who popped up in a lot of shows. He was on Star Trek Enterprise, Star Trek The Next Generation. That's like my second favorite show, and I bobble the name. But he was also on Voyager and a bunch of other shows over the years. Now that I think about it, I'm like, yeah, okay, he hasn't passed away, but he's 84 years old now. But I don't know, he was just awesome in that role, and it was a great role. Like I said, it was Mulder's first informant, Mulder's first source from the inside, who cared enough about revealing the truth and trying to get Mulder on that path of seeking out the truth. So of course, a lot of people hold a very special place in their hearts for Deep Throat, and he basically tries to get Mulder not to do it, but I'm figuring that he did that because he knew Mulder would do it. If he's been given some information but he's told don't investigate it, that just fuels Mulder's fire even more. So he goes to investigate it, and he gets his first real dose of what I call the cover-up and the easy ability of the government to cover everything up. Their ability to not only, dispose of the evidence, but dispose of the witnesses, dispose of memories, even though I don't think that happens a whole lot later on in the show. Mulder essentially gets injected a few times and can't remember exactly everything that happened to him. Deep Throat himself has to kind of remind him. It all culminates in that final scene that is pretty awesome. I wish I could remember exactly the quote, but Deep Throat basically asks Mulder, he said, as someone who believes, why are you not dissuaded when all the evidence to the contrary is there? And Mulder says something along the lines of, all the evidence to the contrary is not entirely dissuasive. And Deep Throat says, exactly, and knows at that moment, I guess, that Mulder is the right one to entrust. And then even there at the end, the very last lines, Mulder says, they're here, aren't they? And Deep Throat says, they've been here for a long, long time. Which, as you go through the show, In the movie, the first movie, yeah, you get an idea that the aliens have been here for quite a long time. And once again, you know, if anybody thinks that this is kind of a spoiler, the aliens are real, the X-Files never tried to pull any punches on that. They've always said the aliens are real, all these supernatural forces are real. It's just that fine line of Mulder being the believer, who represents a certain amount of the audience, and then Scully as the skeptic, who represents another part of the audience, more of a majority of the audience. And this back and forth between the two, and how Scully is always just this close to seeing something, but she doesn't, or what she does see she can explain away. And then Mulder sees it and believes it, but then it's wiped out by the government. That's to me the best part of the tension or the struggle in the X-Files show all throughout its course of 202 episodes, 9 seasons, yada yada yada. Last thing I want to mention about this particular episode before I go, one of my favorite things I wanted to do in these videos is talk about cameos. And I mentioned Jerry Hardin before, but he's not quite the name or the recognizable star as the other person who cameoed in this, well, cameoed, I don't know, just who had a role in this episode, and that's Seth Green. And if you don't know who Seth Green is, you've probably never seen Robot Chicken, you probably never watched Family Guy, or you didn't realize what was going on behind the scenes in Family Guy. You probably didn't know about his filmography that goes way back to the mid-'80s, and just movies all over the place. But Seth Green does the show Robot Chicken on Adult Swim, and it's like a stop-motion kind of animated show, but with like toys and models and stuff like that. It's really, really hilarious, and it references all kinds of nerdy things, all kinds of old, you know, action figures, comic books, video games, cartoons, everything you can imagine. And that's basically his. And well, there's another guy whose name I can't recall, but Seth Green from that show is in this episode of the X-Files, shows Mulder where to go into the Air Force Base to get a better look at the UFO technology aircraft as they're flying around. And he's just like this 90s grunge, you know, dude with long red hair. It's just hilarious to see him if you know who he is and you've seen him nowadays. He was also Scotty Evil in the Austin Powers movies, so that might help a little bit. That was only a few years after his X-Files thing. And then, of course, he does the voice of Chris Griffin from Family Guy. That's their the Griffin's dumb, blonde-haired son. So all throughout the X-Files, there are tons of interesting cameos like that. Or I keep calling them cameos. I don't know that they're cameos, but lots of people who you would recognize from today or the last 5 or 10 years in movies and TV shows and whatnot, who were in the X-Files way back when, before they were really popular. It's one of my favorite things to notice and to talk about with people whenever I get into X-Files discussions. So anyway, that's going to do it for this second episode of my series, Deep Throat, the X-Files Season 1. I plan on watching another episode of the X-Files very soon and trying to jumpstart this series again. So for those of you who watched this whole thing all the way through, which may be nobody, thank you. One way or another, I don't care. I enjoy doing this, and I love the X-Files, and that's what matters. So thanks, guys. I'll see you next time.